The gunshot that killed Martha's husband was still echoing in Teresa Graham's mind 3 years later, as she stood behind the counter of her general store, watching another customer walk out without buying a thing. She was 40 years old, and every single one of those years had carved itself into her face, and bones like the wind carved the Wyoming landscape. The store her parents had built was failing. Her hands ached every morning from the cold that seeped through the cracks in the walls, and the mirror told her what she already knew: she was used up, worn down, and too tired to pretend otherwise. Fort Bridger in the autumn of 1883 was a town that had seen better days, much like Teresa herself. The fort had been established decades ago as a trading post, and the town that grew around it had thrived during the wagon train days. But the railroad had changed everything, rerouting commerce and leaving Fort Bridger as little more than a dusty collection of buildings huddled together against the harsh Wyoming winters. Teresa's general store sat on the main street, its paint peeling and its sign faded, a perfect reflection of the woman who ran it. She was tallying her meager earnings for the week when the door opened, bringing with it a gust of cold October wind and a man she had never seen before. He was tall, with shoulders that filled the doorway, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to conserve energy. His face was weathered, deeply lined around the eyes and mouth, and his dark hair was streaked with gray. He wore a long coat that had seen better days, and his boots were scuffed but well maintained. Everything about him spoke of a man who had lived hard and kept going anyway. "Help you?" Teresa asked, her voice flat. She had learned not to waste enthusiasm on strangers. The man removed his hat, revealing more of that gray-streaked hair. "Looking for supplies. Flour, coffee, salt, beans, whatever you have." Teresa nodded and began gathering items from her shelves, acutely aware of how sparse they looked. She used to keep the store fully stocked, back when her husband Thomas was alive and they ran it together. Back when she had energy and hope, and believed that hard work would be rewarded. Now she ordered carefully, buying only what she thought she could sell, afraid to invest in inventory that might sit and gather dust. The man watched her work with an expression she could not quite read. When she set the supplies on the counter, he pulled out a leather pouch and counted out coins with hands that bore old scars. Up close, she could see more details: the deep creases at the corners of his eyes, the gray stubble on his jaw, the way his shoulders seemed to carry some invisible weight. "You are the owner?" he asked as she wrapped his purchases. "I am. Teresa Graham. My parents built this store 40 years ago. Vincent Vale," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, the handshake of a man who had nothing to prove. "I just bought the old Hendricks Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Teresa knew the property. It had been abandoned for 2 years after old man Hendricks died and his children moved back east. "That place has been empty a long while, needs a lot of work." "I noticed," Vincent said with what might have been a smile. "It was hard to tell under all that weathering. But the price was right, and I needed to settle somewhere. You alone out there, just me and a decent horse." Teresa finished wrapping his supplies and took his money. As she counted out his change, she felt his eyes on her, not in the way some men looked at women, with assessment or hunger, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Recognition. "If you do not mind my asking," Vincent said slowly, "how long have you been running this place by yourself?" The question surprised her. 3 years. My husband died, kicked by a horse, if you can believe something so ordinary could end a life." "I can believe it," Vincent said quietly. "I have seen men survive battles and gunfights only to die falling off a roof or choking on their dinner. Death does not care about drama." Despite herself, Teresa felt a small smile tug at her mouth. "No, I suppose it does not." Vincent gathered his packages. "I will be back. I expect I will need supplies regularly." "We will be here," Teresa said, though even as she spoke, she wondered how much longer that would be true. The store was dying as surely as she was aging, and she had no idea how to stop either process. Over the next few weeks, Vincent became a regular customer. He came to town every Saturday, bought supplies, and exchanged a few words with Teresa. She learned that he was 42 years old, that he had worked cattle drives for 20 years, and that he had saved every penny until he had enough to buy his own land. She learned that he had been born in Texas, but had no family left to speak of, no wife or children, no one waiting for him anywhere in the world. In turn, though she did not volunteer much, Vincent seemed to piece together her own story. She had been married at 21 to Thomas Graham, a man 10 years her senior who had worked her father's store. They had tried for years to have children, but none had come. Her parents had died within a year of each other, leaving her and Thomas to run the store alone. Then Thomas died, and she had been alone ever since, watching the store slowly fail while she grew older and more tired with each passing season. November brought the first serious snow. Teresa woke one morning to find 6 inches blanketing the town, with more falling steadily from a steel-gray sky. She fired up the stove in the store and huddled near it, trying to work up the energy to face another day of minimal customers and dwindling profits. She was going through her account books when she realized just how bad things had become. At the current rate, she would be out of money by spring. The store would close. She would have nothing. She was still staring at the numbers, feeling something very close to panic when the door opened. Vincent stomped snow off his boots and came inside, bringing the cold with him. "Brutal out there," he said, setting down a large package wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something." Teresa looked up, confused. "I did not order anything." "I know. I shot a deer yesterday. Figured you might like some venison." She stared at the package, then at him. "Why would you do that?" Vincent shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Had more than I could use. Seemed wasteful to let it go bad when I have a neighbor who might appreciate it." "We are not neighbors. You are 10 miles away." "Closest person I have got," Vincent said. He studied her face for a moment, and she wondered what he saw there. "You look tired." The observation was so blunt, so honest that it startled a laugh out of her. "I am tired. I am 40 years old and worn out, if you want the truth." Vincent's weathered face creased into what was definitely a smile this time. "Then we match perfectly. I am 42 and about as worn out as they come." Something in his voice, in the way he said it, not with pity or condescension, but with a kind of companionable resignation, made Teresa feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Not hope exactly, but maybe something close to it. The sense that she was not entirely alone in her exhaustion. "Thank you for the venison," she said quietly. Vincent nodded. "You are welcome. Now I need to buy some rope and a new axe handle if you have one." They fell into their usual transaction, but something had shifted. When Vincent left, Teresa unwrapped the venison and found that he had already dressed and cut it, saving her the work. She put most of it in her cold cellar but set aside a portion for dinner. That night, she made venison stew and ate it slowly, savoring each bite, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the food. The winter deepened. Fort Bridger became a frozen, isolated place, with weeks passing between visits from anyone outside town. Teresa's store stayed open, but some days she had no customers at all. She burned through her firewood faster than she wanted to, wore 2 sweaters inside because she could not afford to keep the stove going full blast, and watched her savings dwindle to almost nothing. Vincent came to town every 2 weeks through the worst of the weather, which seemed remarkable given how bad the roads were. Each time he came, he brought something: firewood, smoked meat, once a rabbit fur muff that he claimed he had no use for. Teresa protested at first, but Vincent waved off her objections. "I am doing fine out at the ranch," he said. "Plenty of game, plenty of wood. I have lived lean for so long that having my own land feels like luxury. I can spare a little." "Why?" Teresa asked one particularly cold day in January. "Why do you keep helping me?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around the cup of coffee she had made him. Finally, he said, "Because I know what it is like to be alone and struggling. Spent 20 years of my life that way. Now that I have got something, it seems wrong not to share it with someone who needs it." "I am not a charity case," Teresa said, but there was no heat in her words. "Never said you were. But you are my friend, I think. And friends help each other. Friends." The words settled into Teresa's chest like a warm stone. She had not had a real friend in years. There were people in Fort Bridger she knew, people she exchanged pleasantries with, but no one close. No one who understood what it meant to be worn down by life, but still getting up every morning to face another day. "Yes," she said, "I suppose we are friends." As winter wore on, their friendship deepened. Vincent started staying longer when he came to town, drinking coffee in the store and talking with Teresa about everything and nothing. He told her about the cattle drives he had worked, the places he had seen from Texas to Montana, the men he had known. She told him about growing up in Fort Bridger, about her parents and her marriage, about the dreams she had once had for the store. "I thought it would grow," she said one day in late February, watching snow fall past the window. "I thought we would expand, maybe buy another building, hire some help. Thomas and I talked about it all the time, but nothing ever changed. We just kept doing the same thing year after year until he died, and then I kept doing it alone." "You can still change things," Vincent said. Teresa laughed bitterly. "With what? I am almost out of money. By spring I will have to close the store and find work somewhere, maybe as a cook or a laundress if anyone will hire a 40-year-old woman." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. "What if you did not close the store?" "I cannot keep it running on wishes and air." "No, but you could keep it running with help and investment." Teresa frowned, not understanding. Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I have got money saved," he said. "Not a fortune, but enough, and I have got time. The ranch does not need me every hour of every day, especially in winter. What if I invested in the store, became a partner? We could stock it properly, fix it up, bring in customers." "Why would you do that?" "Because I think it could work. Because I think you need help and I can provide it. And because," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I am tired of being alone out there. I have got my own land now, which I thought was all I wanted, but it turns out owning something is not the same as having a life." Teresa stared at him, her heart beating faster. "You are talking about a business partnership." "I am," Vincent said. "Nothing more. Just two worn-out people helping each other make something work." She wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. "I would need to think about it, figure out the details." "Of course. Think all you need. I am not going anywhere." Teresa thought about it for 3 days, going over every angle she could imagine. It could be a disaster. She barely knew Vincent, really, despite their friendship. He could be a terrible businessman or a cheat or any number of things. But she was also facing certain failure if she did nothing. And something in her gut, some instinct she had learned to trust over 40 years of life, told her that Vincent Vale was exactly what he seemed: a decent man who was tired of being alone. When Vincent came to town the following Saturday, she told him yes. They drew up the partnership papers with the help of Fort Bridger's lawyer. a thin man named Horace Pickering, who seemed surprised that two middle-aged people were going into business together, but asked no impertinent questions. Vincent would invest $500 immediately, with more to come as needed. In return, he would own 40% of the store. Teresa would retain majority ownership and final say on all decisions, but Vincent would be a full partner with input on everything. With the agreement signed, things happened quickly. Vincent brought his investment money to town in gold coins and paper money, more cash than Teresa had seen in years. Together they made lists of what the store needed: inventory, obviously, but also repairs to the building, new shelving, a better stove, paint for the exterior. "We will wait until spring for the outside work," Vincent said, "but we can start stocking shelves now. Make a list of every supplier you know. We are going to fill this place properly." Working with Vincent was different from working with Thomas. Her husband had been a steady, methodical man who resisted change and preferred to do things the way they had always been done. Vincent, by contrast, had ideas and energy despite his worn-out appearance. He suggested new products, better quality tools, fabric and sewing supplies for the women in town, even some candy and toys for children. "People will buy things they do not strictly need if you make it appealing enough," he said. "I have seen it in every town I ever worked in. A general store should have a little bit of everything." He was also good with customers in a way Thomas had never been. Where Thomas had been reserved, Vincent was friendly and talkative, asking questions and remembering details. He learned names quickly and seemed genuinely interested in people's lives. Within a few weeks, word had spread that the general store had a new partner and new stock, and customers who had been shopping elsewhere started coming back. Teresa watched all this with something like amazement. Her store, which had been dying slowly for years, was coming back to life. And Vincent, this weathered cowboy who had walked through her door just a few months ago, was making it happen. But it was not just the store that was changing. Teresa herself felt different. She woke up each morning with something to look forward to, not just the grind of survival but actual plans and projects. She and Vincent would meet in the store after closing and discuss ideas, sometimes talking until well after dark. She found herself laughing more, smiling more, feeling more alive than she had in years. Spring came late to Wyoming, but when it finally arrived in April, it brought a kind of awakening. The snow melted, the sun grew warmer, and Fort Bridger emerged from its winter hibernation. Vincent hired 2 men to repair the store's exterior, fixing the roof and replacing damaged boards. Teresa chose new paint, a cheerful yellow that made the building stand out on the drab Main Street. "It looks like a new place," Teresa said, standing outside with Vincent to admire the work. "It is a new place," Vincent replied. "New beginning for both of us, I think." She glanced at him, at his weathered face and gray-streaked hair, and felt something shift inside her chest. Over the past months, Vincent had become essential to her daily life. She looked forward to seeing him, missed him when he was not around, found herself thinking about him at odd moments. She told herself it was just friendship, just gratitude for his help with the store. But standing there in the spring sunshine, she recognized the feeling for what it was. She was falling in love with him. The realization terrified her. She was 40 years old, long past the age of romantic foolishness, and Vincent had never given any indication that he thought of her as anything other than a business partner and friend. He was unfailingly polite, never crossed any boundaries, never said or did anything inappropriate. Surely he saw her as she saw herself, a worn-out, middle-aged woman with nothing to offer. But despite her fear, the feeling grew. She noticed everything about him now: the way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, The small smile he got when something amused him, the gentleness in his hands when he worked. She noticed how patient he was with customers, how he always carried heavy packages to people's wagons, how he never complained even when he was clearly tired. One evening in May, they were closing up the store together when Vincent said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "The ranch. It is doing well enough, but I could use some help. I was thinking of hiring a hand, but that would mean building another cabin, paying wages. Then I thought, what if I raised some chickens and maybe a milk cow? Things I could manage myself, but that would provide extra income. I could sell eggs and milk here in the store." "That is a good idea," Teresa said. "People would buy those fresh. Only problem is I do not know much about chickens or dairy cows. I am a cattle man, always have been. I would need to learn." Teresa smiled. "I know a bit about both. My parents kept chickens when I was growing up, and we had a milk cow for years. I could teach you." Vincent looked at her with something warm in his eyes. "Would you? I mean, would you be willing to come out to the ranch and show me how to set things up?" The invitation made Teresa's heart race. Going to Vincent's ranch felt significant somehow, like crossing a boundary they had carefully maintained. But she heard herself say, "Yes, I would be happy to help." They arranged for the following Sunday. Vincent came to town in his wagon to pick her up, and they drove north under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Teresa had not been outside Fort Bridger in months, and she felt almost giddy with the novelty of it. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, rolling grassland interrupted by rocky outcrops, with the mountains visible in the distance. Vincent's ranch was modest but well maintained. He had a sturdy cabin, a small barn, corrals for horses, and pasture for the cattle he planned to run. Everything was neat and orderly, showing the care of a man who took pride in his work. "It is not much yet," Vincent said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but it is mine." "It is wonderful," Teresa said honestly. She could see what it would become, a real working ranch, a place of substance. "You should be proud." They spent the afternoon discussing where to build a chicken coop and where to keep a milk cow. Teresa sketched out plans while Vincent took notes. He made lunch simple cowboy fare of beans and bacon, but he cooked with an easy competence that spoke of long practice. They ate outside, sitting on the cabin steps, and talked about their plans for both the ranch and the store. "I never thought I would have this," Vincent said, looking out over his land. "I spent so long just moving from place to place, never putting down roots. It feels strange to be settled." "Good strange, but strange." "I have never been anywhere but Fort Bridger," Teresa said. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to see other places the way you have. You would have liked it, I think. There are some beautiful places out there. But there is something to be said for knowing where you belong." He looked at her. "You belong here, I can tell." "I suppose I do," Teresa said. "Though lately I have been thinking maybe I belong wherever the store is. It matters less to me that it is Fort Bridger and more that it is mine." Vincent nodded slowly. "I understand that." The drive back to town as the sun was setting felt different somehow. They talked less, but the silence was comfortable, companionable. When Vincent pulled up in front of Teresa's small house behind the store, he climbed down and helped her from the wagon. For a moment, they stood close together, his hands on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. Teresa's breath caught. Vincent was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before, something open and vulnerable. "Teresa," he said quietly, then stopped. "Yes," he seemed to struggle with something, then said, "Thank you for today, for your help, for everything, really." It was not what he had started to say, Teresa was sure of it. But she smiled and said, "You are welcome." After he left, she stood outside for a long time, watching his wagon disappear into the dusk, wondering what he had really wanted to say. Summer came to Wyoming with startling speed, transforming the landscape from brown to green almost overnight. The store was thriving now, busier than it had been in years. Vincent had been right about everything: the new inventory, the better displays, the friendly service. People came from surrounding ranches and even from other small towns, drawn by word of mouth about the improved general store. Vincent was spending more time in town now, often staying several days in a row. He rented a room at the boarding house but spent most of his waking hours at the store. He and Teresa fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. She handled the books and ordering, while he managed the inventory and customer service. They complemented each other perfectly, each strong where the other was weak. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became for Teresa to hide her feelings. She was acutely aware of him always, where he was in the store, what he was doing, the sound of his voice when he talked to customers. At night she lay awake thinking about him, replaying conversations, imagining what it would be like to touch him, to be held by him. She knew she was being foolish. Vincent had never indicated that he wanted more than friendship and partnership. He was kind to her, considerate, but he was kind to everyone. She was reading things into his behavior that probably were not there, seeing what she wanted to see. One afternoon in late June, a woman came into the store who made Teresa's heart sink. She was young, not more than 25, and beautiful in the way that young women often are, with smooth skin and bright eyes and all the energy of youth. She was also clearly interested in Vincent. "You must be Mr. Vale," she said, approaching him with a smile that showed perfect teeth. "I have heard so much about you. I am Charlotte Simmons. My father owns the biggest ranch in the county." Vincent was polite but not overly friendly. "Nice to meet you, Miss Simmons. What can I help you with?" "Oh, I am just looking around, but perhaps you could show me some things." "I would love to hear your recommendations." Teresa watched from behind the counter as Charlotte flirted shamelessly with Vincent, touching his arm, laughing at things he said that were not particularly funny, asking questions that seemed designed to keep him talking. Vincent remained polite but somewhat reserved, showing her various items but not encouraging her obvious interest. When Charlotte finally left without buying much, Vincent came to the counter looking tired. "She was certainly friendly," Teresa said, trying to keep her voice light. "She was certainly something," Vincent muttered. He looked at Teresa. "Are you all right?" "Of course. Why would I not be? You seem upset." Teresa forced a smile. "Just a long day," but Vincent was not fooled. He studied her face for a moment, then said quietly, "You know I am not interested in women like that, right? It is none of my business who you are interested in." "Teresa." He waited until she looked at him. "I am not interested in women like that because I am interested in you." The words hung in the air between them. Teresa's heart was pounding so hard she thought Vincent must be able to hear it. "What?" she managed to say. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I have been wanting to say something for months now, but I did not know how. I did not want to ruin what we have, the partnership and friendship. But watching that girl flirt with me and seeing your face, I realized I need to be honest." "Honest about what?" "About the fact that I think about you all the time. That I look forward to seeing you every day. That when I am at the ranch alone, I am wishing you were there with me. That somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." Teresa stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You love me." "I do. I know I am too old and too worn out to be any woman's dream, and I know you probably think of me as just a friend and business partner. But I needed you to know. I could not keep pretending otherwise." "Vincent," Teresa said, and her voice was shaking. "I am 40 years old. I am used up and tired, and I have nothing special to offer anyone. Why would you want me when you could have someone young and beautiful like that girl? Vincent came around the counter and took her hands in his. His calloused palms were warm against her skin. Because you are not used up, he said intensely. Because when I look at you, I see someone strong and smart and beautiful. Because you understand what it is like to be worn down by life, but to keep going anyway. Because you laugh at my jokes and challenge my ideas and make me want to be a better man. Because I do not want some young girl who has not lived yet. I want you, Teresa, just exactly as you are. Tears were streaming down Teresa's face now. I love you too, she whispered. I have loved you for months, but I was afraid to hope that you might feel the same way. Vincent pulled her close, and she went into his arms as if she had been made to fit there. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, and she felt something hard and knotted inside her chest finally loosen. For the first time in years, maybe in her entire life, she felt completely seen and completely wanted. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying a little. Vincent cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently at first and then with more passion. Teresa kissed him back, pouring all her loneliness and longing and love into the kiss, and felt him do the same. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. So what do we do now? He asked. I suppose we see where this goes, Teresa said. Together, Vincent agreed. I like the sound of that. Everything changed after that day, yet in some ways everything stayed the same. They still ran the store together, still worked as partners. But now there was an added dimension to everything they did. Vincent would touch her hand as he passed, or she would brush against him deliberately, and they would exchange small smiles full of meaning. He started coming to her house for dinner, and they would sit together on her small porch as the sun set, talking about their days and their dreams. Vincent courted her properly, despite their age. He brought her flowers picked from the prairie, took her on rides in his wagon to see pretty views, treated her with a respect and tenderness that made her feel precious. In turn, Teresa opened up to him in ways she had never opened up to anyone, sharing her fears and disappointments along with her hopes. I always wanted children, she confessed one evening as they sat together watching the stars come out. Thomas and I tried for years, but it never happened. Eventually we stopped talking about it. I mourned that dream for a long time. Vincent squeezed her hand. I am sorry, that must have been painful. It was, but I have made peace with it now. My life is full in other ways. Still, Vincent said quietly, I am sorry you did not get everything you wanted. What about you? Teresa asked. Did you ever want children? I thought about it sometimes, but I was never in one place long enough to marry, let alone raise a family. I figured that was not the life I was meant for. He paused. But lately I have been thinking maybe it is not too late for everything. Maybe two worn-out people can still build something new. Teresa looked at him. What are you saying? Vincent turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. I am saying I want to marry you, Teresa. I want us to build a life together, run the store together, maybe turn the ranch into something bigger. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want whatever years we have left to be spent together. Are you proposing to me? Teresa asked, her heart racing. I am. I know I do not have a ring yet, and this is not very romantic sitting on your porch like this, but I could not wait any longer to ask. Teresa Graham, will you marry me? She did not hesitate. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Vincent pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. When they parted, both were grinning like fools. When? Vincent asked. How soon can we do this? Teresa laughed. As soon as you like. I am not some young girl who needs months to prepare. We could marry next week if we wanted. Next week, Vincent said firmly. Let's do it next week. They were married on a Wednesday afternoon in early July in a small ceremony at Fort Bridger's church. The whole town turned out, curious and delighted by the middle-aged romance that had blossomed in their midst. Teresa wore a simple blue dress that she had owned for years, and Vincent wore his best suit, which was still rather worn but clean and pressed. The preacher smiled throughout the ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the small church erupted in applause. At the reception in the church hall, people congratulated them with genuine warmth. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the boarding house, hugged Teresa and whispered, "I am so happy for you. You deserve this." Even Charlotte Simmons showed up, though she looked rather sour. "Congratulations," she said stiffly to Vincent. He thanked her politely and kept his arm around Teresa's waist, making it abundantly clear where his affections lay. When the reception ended, Vincent drove Teresa to the ranch, their ranch now. He had spent the past week preparing, cleaning the cabin thoroughly and adding small touches he thought she would like. There were wildflowers in a jar on the table, new curtains on the windows, and a colorful quilt on the bed that he had purchased from a woman in town. "It is not fancy," he said as he carried her over the threshold, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Teresa said, and meant it. The cabin was small and simple, but it felt like home in a way her house in town never had. This was a place she and Vincent would build together. That night, as they lay together in the big bed, Teresa marveled at the strangeness of her life. 6 months ago she had been alone and failing, certain that her best years were behind her. Now she was married to a man she loved deeply, running a successful store and looking forward to the future with hope. She was still 40 years old and still bore all the marks of the hard years she had lived, but somehow that no longer mattered. Vincent loved her not in spite of those marks but because of them, because they were proof that she had survived and endured. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, his arm around her shoulders. "That I am happy," Teresa said simply. "Truly happy for the first time in years." "Good," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head. "So am I." They settled into married life with the ease of people who were mature enough to know what mattered and what did not. Teresa split her time between the cabin and the store, spending 3 days a week at the ranch and 4 days in town. Vincent did the same, working the ranch when needed but also spending considerable time at the store. They hired a young man named Peter to help with both the store and the ranch work, giving them more flexibility. The chicken coop Vincent had built was home to 24 laying hens, and they had acquired a gentle milk cow named Rosie. Teresa taught Vincent how to manage both, and soon they were selling fresh eggs and milk at the store, just as they had planned. The additional income was modest but steady, and more importantly, it gave them a sense of building something together. By the end of summer, it was clear that the store was not just surviving but thriving. They had paid back Vincent's initial investment and were making enough profit to expand further. Vincent suggested opening a second room in the store dedicated to farming equipment and ranch supplies, and Teresa agreed. They bought the necessary inventory and hired a carpenter to break through the wall and expand the space. "We are building an empire," Teresa joked one evening as they reviewed the plans. "A very small empire," Vincent said with a smile, "but it is ours." That autumn, as Fort Bridger prepared for another winter, Teresa realized she felt different in a way she could not quite name. She was tired more often, which she attributed to working long hours. But there was something else too, a strange queasiness in the mornings, a heightened sensitivity to smells. It took her several weeks to recognize the symptoms for what they were, and even then she did not dare believe it. She went to see Dr. Morrison, the town's elderly physician, without telling Vincent. Dr. Morrison examined her and then smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Vale. You are pregnant." Teresa stared at him in shock. "That is not possible. I am 40 years old. My husband and I tried for years to have children and never could." "Sometimes these things happen when we least expect them," Dr. Morrison said gently. "You are healthy, and there is no reason to think you cannot carry this child to term. Though I will warn you, pregnancies after 40 can be more difficult. You will need to take care of yourself." Teresa walked out of the doctor's office in a daze. Pregnant. At 40 years old, after decades of believing it would never happen, she was going to have a child. Vincent's child. The joy that flooded through her was so intense it was almost painful. She went straight to the ranch where Vincent was repairing a fence. He looked up as she approached, and his expression immediately turned concerned. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am fine," Teresa said. "Better than fine. Vincent, I am pregnant." He froze, his hammer dangling from one hand. "What? I am pregnant." Dr. Morrison confirmed it. "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Vincent dropped the hammer and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Are you sure? Is it safe? Are you all right?" "I am sure. The doctor says I am healthy. It will be fine." Vincent laughed, a sound of pure joy. "A baby! We are going to have a baby." He kissed her, then knelt down and gently placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I am very, very happy to know you are coming." Teresa ran her fingers through his gray, streaked hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had come into her life when she thought everything was ending and shown her that new beginnings were possible at any age. The pregnancy was harder than Teresa had expected. She was tired all the time, and the morning sickness lasted well into her 4th month. Her back ached, her feet swelled, and by her 7th month she felt enormous and ungainly. But Vincent was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over more of the store work and insisting that she rest when she needed to. "You are growing our child," he would say whenever she protested that she should be doing more. "That is the most important work there is." The people of Fort Bridger were fascinated by the middle-aged pregnancy. Women who had ignored Teresa for years suddenly wanted to offer advice and share their own birth stories. Mrs. Peterson knitted baby clothes. Even Charlotte Simmons sent over a small gift, though she did not deliver it in person. Winter came again, the second winter since Vincent had walked into Teresa's store. This time, though, everything was different. The store was warm and well-stocked, the ranch was thriving, and Teresa had a husband who loved her and a child on the way. On the coldest nights, she and Vincent would sit by the fire in their cabin, his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "What do you hope for?" Teresa asked one such night. "Boy or girl?" "Healthy," Vincent said immediately. "That is all I care about, healthy baby, healthy wife." "But if you could choose," Vincent considered. "A boy, maybe, someone I could teach about ranching and horses, but a girl would be wonderful too." "Someone like you." Teresa smiled. "I think a boy. I want a son who looks like you." She went into labor on a frigid February morning. Vincent drove her to town in the wagon, driving faster than was probably safe on the icy roads, and fetched Dr. Morrison. The labor was long and difficult, 18 hours of hard work that left Teresa exhausted and scared. But Vincent stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, encouraging her. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." Finally, as the sun was setting, Teresa gave a final push and felt the baby leave her body. There was a moment of terrible silence, and then a thin wail filled the room. Dr. Morrison held up a small, red, wrinkled infant. "It is a boy," he said, smiling. "A healthy baby boy." Vincent was crying openly as Dr. Morrison handed him the baby. He carried the infant to Teresa, who was crying too, and placed him in her arms. "Our son," Vincent whispered. "We made a son." Teresa looked down at the tiny face, at the dark eyes that were trying to focus on her, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. He was perfect, small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and Vincent's nose. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Thomas Vincent Vale, honoring both Teresa's first husband and his father. Little Thomas Tommy was a good baby, healthy and relatively quiet. Teresa, who had thought she was too old and too tired to care for an infant, found reserves of energy she did not know she possessed. Vincent was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at him. "I never thought I would have this," he said over and over. "I never thought I would be a father." Spring came, bringing with it Tommy's first smiles and the first real warmth after a brutal winter. Vincent hired additional help for both the store and the ranch, insisting that he and Teresa needed time to focus on their son. They fell into a new rhythm, balancing work and parenthood, learning as they went. When Tommy was 6 months old, Teresa's old friend Sarah from a neighboring ranch came to visit and brought her teenage daughters. The girls cooed over the baby while Sarah and Teresa drank tea in the cabin. "I have to say, Teresa, when I heard you had married and gotten pregnant at 40, I thought you were crazy," Sarah said. "But seeing you now, you look happier than I have ever seen you." "I am," Teresa said simply. "I did not think it was possible to be this happy. I thought my life was over, or at least that all the good parts were behind me, but it turns out I was wrong." "That cowboy of yours is a good man," Sarah said. "The way he looks at you and that baby, it is clear he adores you both." "He does," Teresa agreed, "and I adore him right back." The years passed in the way they do when life is full and happy, quickly but richly. Tommy grew from a baby to a toddler to a small boy, bright and curious and full of energy. Vincent taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, and by the time he was 5, Tommy could sit a horse almost as well as his father. He loved the ranch and the animals, but he also loved helping in the store, charming customers with his chatter and enthusiasm. Teresa and Vincent expanded the store twice more, eventually buying the building next door and knocking through the walls to create a true general store that served the entire county. They hired staff to run it most of the time, freeing themselves to focus more on the ranch and on Tommy. Vincent built a larger house on the ranch property, a real family home with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Teresa made it beautiful with curtains and quilts and all the small touches that turned a house into a home. When Teresa was 46 and Vincent was 48, she found herself pregnant again. This time she was less shocked but more worried. The first pregnancy had been hard, and she was 6 years older now. But Dr. Morrison assured her she was healthy, and Vincent was thrilled. "Another child," he said, his hand on her belly. "We are truly blessed." The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Teresa knew what to expect. She delivered a healthy baby girl on a warm September evening, with Tommy waiting anxiously in the next room to meet his sister. They named her Eleanor Grace Vale, after Vincent's mother. Eleanor Ellie was different from Tommy in every way. Where he had been a relatively easy baby, she was fussy and demanding. Where he had been adventurous, she was cautious. But she was beautiful, with Teresa's features and Vincent's dark eyes, and both her parents fell in love with her instantly. Tommy, now 6 years old, took his role as big brother seriously. He helped change diapers, fetched things for his mother, and sang to Ellie when she cried. Vincent watched his children together and often had to wipe his eyes. "I never imagined having this," he told Teresa one evening as they watched Tommy gently rock Ellie's cradle. "A wife I love, children, a home. I thought I was too old and too worn out for any of it." "We both thought that," Teresa said, leaning against him. "But we were wrong. We were not worn out. We were just waiting for the right time and the right person." By the time Teresa turned 50, she had a life that bore no resemblance to the one she had lived a decade earlier. The store was now run entirely by Peter and his wife, though Teresa and Vincent still owned it and received a substantial income from it. The ranch had expanded to over 1,000 acres, with a sizable herd of cattle and horses. Tommy was now 11, tall and lean like his father, already helping with the ranch work in meaningful ways. Ellie was 5, attending the small school in Fort Bridger and showing signs of inheriting her mother's head for numbers. Vincent was 52 now, his hair almost entirely gray, his face even more weathered by sun and wind. But to Teresa, he was as handsome as the day she had met him. More so, perhaps, because now when she looked at him, she saw not just his weathered face but everything he represented: love, partnership, family, home. One evening in late summer, they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over their land. The children were in bed, and the world was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the occasional call of a night bird. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, taking her hand. "More than I ever thought possible," Teresa said. "You? So happy it scares me sometimes," Vincent admitted. "I keep thinking I will wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It is real," Teresa assured him. "All of this is real. We built it together." Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Do you remember what you said to me that day? That you were 40 and worn out?" "I remember. I told you we matched perfectly. And we do, but not because we are worn out. We match because we both understand that it is never too late for happiness. That sometimes the best things in life come when you are not expecting them." "We found each other when we both needed each other most," Teresa said. "And we built something beautiful together." Vincent pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched out in all directions. And between them, the love that had grown from friendship into something deep and unshakable wrapped around them like a blanket. Teresa had thought, at 40, that her life was essentially over, that she had nothing left to offer and nothing left to hope for. But Vincent had shown her otherwise. He had seen past her age and her tiredness to the strength and beauty underneath. He had partnered with her, courted her, married her, and built a family with her. Together they had created a life that neither of them could have built alone. The years continued to pass. Tommy grew into a young man, strong and capable, with his father's way with horses and his mother's business sense. At 18, he took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, though Vincent still worked alongside him, teaching and guiding. Ellie, at 12, was already helping keep the ranch books and talking about going to college, something almost unheard of for a girl from a small Wyoming town. Vincent and Teresa were in their early 50s now, officially old by frontier standards, but they did not feel old. Yes, there were more aches and pains than there had been 10 years ago. Yes, they tired more easily and moved a little slower, but they were healthy and active, still working, still engaged with life. One day in the spring of Teresa's 53rd year, a young couple came to the ranch asking to speak with her and Vincent. The man looked nervous, his hat clutched in his hands, while the young woman beside him looked both hopeful and frightened. "We heard you might be willing to sell the general store," the man said. "We are looking to settle in Fort Bridger, and we have some money saved. Not a lot, but enough for a down payment if you would be willing to work out terms. Teresa and Vincent exchanged a glance. They had been thinking about selling the store for a while now, though they had not advertised it. Peter and his wife wanted to move closer to her family, and neither Teresa nor Vincent had the desire to go back to running it full-time. "Tell us about yourselves," Vincent said, gesturing for the couple to sit. Their names were Jacob and Mary Brenner. They were both 25, married for 3 years, and had been working at a larger store in Laramie. They wanted to own their own business, to build something together in a small town where they could raise a family. As they talked, Teresa saw herself and Vincent reflected in this young couple, the same hopes, the same determination, the same willingness to work hard for what they wanted. When Jacob finished talking, she looked at Vincent and saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. "We will sell you the store," Vincent said, "and we will work out terms that you can manage, but I want something in return." Jacob nodded eagerly. "Anything. I want you to promise that you will treat it well, that you will build on what we started, not tear it down. And I want you to remember that sometimes the people who come into your store are not just customers, they are neighbors and friends who might need help. If you can do that, we have a deal." Jacob and Mary agreed immediately, and over the next several weeks, they worked out the details of the sale. When the papers were signed and the store officially changed hands, Teresa felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The store had been her life for so long, first as her parents' legacy, and then as the thing that brought Vincent into her life. But it was time to let it go, to let someone else build their dreams there. With the store sold and Tommy running the ranch, Teresa and Vincent found themselves with more free time than they had had in years. They used it to travel a little short trips to Denver and Salt Lake City, places Vincent had worked in his cattle driving days and wanted to show Teresa. They also used it to help their children. Tommy was courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, a sweet young woman named Catherine, and they helped plan the wedding. Ellie was preparing for college, and they worked with her on her applications. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching another Wyoming sunset, Teresa said, "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if we had not met?" "All the time," Vincent said. "I think about that day I walked into your store looking for supplies. I almost went to the other store in town instead. If I had, everything would be different." "I would probably have lost the store," Teresa said. "I would be working as a cook somewhere, or maybe I would have moved away entirely, trying to find work somewhere else. And you would be alone on your ranch, still working yourself to death." "We saved each other," Vincent said simply. "You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive, and I hope I did the same for you." "You did," Teresa said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what I think about sometimes. That day I told you I was 40 and worn out. I believed it so completely. I thought I had nothing left to give, nothing left to be. And then you told me we matched perfectly, and you looked at me like I was something precious instead of something used up. That was the moment everything changed." "You were never worn out," Vincent said. "You were just tired and alone. There is a difference. I know that now, but I did not know it then. You taught me that age is just a number, that it is never too late to start over, that sometimes the best part of your life comes when you least expect it." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "We taught each other a lot of things. I learned that home is not a place but a person. That love can come at any age and be just as powerful as it would be at 20. That I am stronger with you than I ever was alone." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Around them, their land stretched out, land they had worked together, land they had built a life on. Inside the house, the sounds of their children moving around, getting ready for supper. This was what happiness looked like, Teresa thought. not excitement or passion, though they had had plenty of both over the years. But this deep contentment, this sense of being exactly where you belonged with exactly the right person. Tommy married Catherine in the summer of Teresa's 54th year, in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Fort Bridger. The young couple moved into a new house Tommy had built on the ranch property, close enough to help with the work, but far enough to have their own space. A year later, they made Teresa and Vincent grandparents for the first time when Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Vincent Thomas Brenner, honoring both his grandfathers. Holding her grandson for the first time, Teresa was overwhelmed with emotion. She had thought so long ago that she would never have children of her own, let alone grandchildren. And yet here she was at 55 with 2 grown children, a grandchild, and the man she loved by her side. "We have been so blessed," she whispered to Vincent as they looked at the sleeping baby together. "More than blessed," Vincent agreed. "We have been given a second chance at life and we made the most of it." Ellie left for college in Colorado that fall, the first person in either family to pursue higher education. Teresa cried when they put her on the train, but they were tears of pride as much as sadness. Her daughter was smart and capable and would do great things. And she would always have a home to come back to, always have parents who loved and supported her. With the children grown and the ranch running smoothly, Teresa and Vincent settled into what they privately called their golden years. They were in their mid-50s now, old by the standards of the frontier but healthy and active. They spent their days working on the ranch at their own pace, helping Tommy when he needed it, but also taking time for themselves. They rode out together to check on the cattle, had long conversations over coffee in the mornings, read to each other in the evenings. One day in the fall, Vincent came into the house with a strange expression on his face. "You will never guess who I just saw in town." "Who?" "Charlotte Simmons." "Remember her? The girl who tried to flirt with me in the store all those years ago," Teresa laughed. "I remember. What happened to her?" "Married some banker from Cheyenne. Has 4 children and looked absolutely exhausted. She saw me and asked about you." When I told her we had been married for 15 years and had 2 children and a grandchild, her mouth fell open. I think she could not believe it. "Poor thing," Teresa said, and she meant it. "I hope she is happy even if she looked exhausted." "She seemed content enough," Vincent said. "But I kept thinking, as I talked to her, how grateful I am that she was not interested in me. Because if she had been, if I had fallen for a young, pretty thing like that, I would have missed out on you, and that would have been the greatest tragedy of my life." Teresa kissed him softly. "I am grateful too. For all of it, the struggles that brought us together, the age we were when we met, the fact that we were both worn out enough to recognize something real when we found it." "Not worn out," Vincent corrected gently. "Just ready. We were ready for each other." "Yes," Teresa agreed. "We were." As the years continued, their life together only grew richer. Tommy and Catherine had 2 more children, giving Teresa and Vincent 3 grandchildren to dote on. Ellie graduated from college and came home, surprising everyone by wanting to stay in Fort Bridger. She opened a small accounting office in town, helping local businesses and ranchers manage their finances. She married a teacher named William, and they built a house in town and started their own family. By the time Teresa turned 60, she and Vincent had been married for 20 years. They threw a big party to celebrate, inviting everyone they knew in Fort Bridger and the surrounding ranches. The house and yard were full of people, their children and grandchildren, friends they had made over the years, people whose lives they had touched in small and large ways. Tommy gave a toast, his voice thick with emotion. "My parents taught me that it is never too late to find love, never too late to start over, never too late to build something beautiful. They were both middle-aged when they met, both thinking their best years were behind them. But they proved that wrong. They built this ranch together, raised me and my sister together, and created a family that is strong and loving and real. I hope Catherine and I can build something even half as good as what they have." Vincent stood to respond, pulling Teresa up beside him. "My wife told me once when we first met that she was 40 and worn out. I told her we matched perfectly, and we did, but not for the reasons she thought. We matched because we were both at a place in our lives where we appreciated what we had found. We did not take each other for granted. We worked hard together to build this life, and it has been the greatest joy of my existence." Teresa could not speak, too overcome with emotion. She looked around at all the faces, her children, her grandchildren, her friends, and felt such overwhelming gratitude that she thought her heart might burst. All of this had come from that moment when a weathered cowboy walked into her failing store and saw something in her that she had not seen in herself. All of this had grown from two middle-aged people deciding to take a chance on each other. Later that evening, when the party was winding down and most of the guests had left, Teresa and Vincent walked out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a small rise that overlooked the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the land stretched out before them in every direction. 20 years, Teresa said softly. "Can you believe it has been 20 years? Some days it feels like forever," Vincent said, "and some days it feels like we just met yesterday." "I would not change a single thing," Teresa said. "Not the struggles, not the hard times, not the age we were when we found each other. It all led us here to this." Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the sunset. Teresa leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the absolute rightness of being exactly where she was. "I love you," Vincent murmured into her hair. "I loved you when you were 40 and thought you were worn out. I loved you when you were pregnant and tired and scared. I loved you through every year and every moment, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you too," Teresa whispered. "You saved my life, Vincent Vale. You walked into my store when I needed you most and showed me that it was not too late for anything, that I was not worn out, that the best was yet to come. We saved each other," Vincent said, "and we built something beautiful together." They stood there until the sun disappeared completely and the first stars began to appear. Behind them, their house glowed with warm light, full of the sounds of their family. Around them, the land they had worked together to build spread out in every direction. And between them, the love that had sustained them through 20 years of marriage wrapped around them like a promise. Teresa thought back to that woman she had been at 40, tired, lonely, convinced that her life was essentially over. She thought about how wrong she had been, how much joy and love and life she would have missed if she had given up. And she thought about Vincent, this wonderful man who had looked at her worn-out face and seen beauty, who had heard her exhaustion and offered partnership, who had loved her exactly as she was and helped her become even more. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For everything. For seeing me. For loving me. For building this life with me. For proving that it is never too late for happiness." Vincent turned her in his arms and kissed her, a long, slow kiss that tasted of 20 years of love and partnership and joy. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come on," Vincent said, taking her hand. "Let's go home." And they walked back to their house together, two people who had found each other when they needed each other most, who had built a beautiful life from nothing but hard work and love and faith that they matched perfectly. Two people who had proven that age was just a number, that worn out was just a state of mind, and that the best things in life often came when you least expected them. The years that followed were gentle ones. Vincent eventually retired fully from ranch work, leaving it entirely in Tommy's capable hands. They spent their days reading, gardening, spoiling their growing number of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. They took more trips, visiting Ellie's family in town regularly and occasionally making longer journeys to see places they had always wanted to see. On Teresa's 65th birthday, Vincent gave her a leather-bound journal. "For your memories," he said. "I want you to write down our story, so our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will know how we found each other." Teresa started writing that very day, and over the next year, she filled the journal with their story from that first meeting in the store to their wedding to the birth of their children, to all the small and large moments that had made up their life together. She wrote about how she had thought at 40 that she was worn out, and how Vincent had shown her otherwise. She wrote about building a life together, about love that came late but burned just as brightly as young love. She wrote about the joy of finding your perfect match, even when you thought it was too late. When she finished, she gave the journal to Vincent to read. He sat in his favorite chair by the fire and read it cover to cover, and when he was done, his eyes were wet. "You captured it perfectly," he said. "Every moment, every feeling. This is our legacy, Teresa. This story of two worn-out people who found each other and built something beautiful." "We are not worn out anymore," Teresa said, settling into the chair beside him. "We are well used and well loved." "There is a difference." Vincent reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that had become second nature over 25 years of marriage. "Yes, there is, and I would not change a single thing about our well-used, well-loved life." As they sat together by the fire, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built, photographs of their children and grandchildren, furniture they had chosen together, books they had read aloud to each other, Teresa reflected on how unpredictable life was. If someone had told her at 40, when she was standing in her failing store, convinced her life was over, that she would spend the next 25 years blissfully happy with a man she had not even met yet, she never would have believed them. But it had happened. Against all odds, in a time and place where middle-aged people were considered old and past their prime, she and Vincent had found each other. They had fallen in love, married, had children, built a business and a ranch, and created a family legacy that would last for generations. They had proven that worn out was a choice, not a fact, that love could bloom at any age, that it was never too late to start over. One warm summer evening, when Teresa was 67 and Vincent was 69, they rode out together to their favorite spot on the ranch. It was harder now. They moved slower, mounted their horses more carefully, felt every bounce and jar of the ride. But they made it, as they always did, and sat together on the rise watching the sunset. "You remember," Teresa said, "what you told me that first time I said I was worn out?" "I remember everything about those early days," Vincent said. "I told you we matched perfectly. Did you mean it? Or were you just being kind?" Vincent turned to look at her, his weathered face serious. "I meant it with every fiber of my being. I saw you that day. Teresa really saw you. I saw a woman who had survived, who had endured, who had kept going even when things were hard. I saw strength and beauty, and someone who understood what I understood about life. We matched perfectly because we were both at exactly the right place at exactly the right time." "We did match perfectly," Teresa agreed. "We still do. Even now, with all our aches and pains and gray hair and wrinkles, we fit together." "Always have, always will," Vincent said. He reached for her hand. "I would live every hard year of my life over again if I knew it would lead me to you. Every struggle, every disappointment, every lonely night, it was all worth it because it brought me here." "Me too," Teresa whispered. Every single moment was worth it. They sat together until the stars came out, two old people who had found love late in life and cherished every moment of it. When the air grew cool, they carefully mounted their horses and rode back to the house, where the lights were on, and their family waited. Tommy was there with his family, Catherine, and their 3 children, the oldest now a teenager. Ellie had come out from town with William and their 2 children. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, 3 generations of the family that Teresa and Vincent had created together. As Teresa stood in the doorway watching her grandchildren play while her children talked and laughed, she felt Vincent's arm come around her waist. She leaned into him, this man who had been her partner for more than a quarter century, and smiled. "We did good," Vincent said softly. "We did," Teresa agreed. "We did very, very good." That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Teresa and Vincent lay in bed together as they had for so many years. In the darkness, Vincent found her hand and held it tight. "Teresa," he said quietly. "Yes, thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for marrying me and building this life with me. Thank you for being my perfect match." Teresa squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. "Thank you for seeing past the worn-out 40-year-old woman to who I really was underneath. Thank you for loving me and building this family with me. Thank you for proving that it is never too late for anything." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped together. 2 people who had found each other when they both needed finding and created something beautiful that would outlast them both. 2 people who had proven that age was irrelevant when you found your perfect match. 2 people who had taken the words worn out and transformed them into well-loved and deeply happy. The seasons continued to turn. Teresa and Vincent grew older, moving slower, needing more help with things they used to do easily. But they were together, and that was all that mattered. They were surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that the life they had built would continue long after they were gone. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were now 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. The house and yard overflowed with people, all of them there because 2 worn-out middle-aged people had taken a chance on love 3 decades earlier. Ellie, now 40 and a mother of teenage children herself, stood to give a speech. "My parents' story has always inspired me," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "They met when they were both convinced their best years were behind them. My mother was 40 and running a failing store. My father was 42 and living alone on a rundown ranch. They were tired and lonely and worn out. But they found each other, and instead of giving up, they built something amazing together. They showed me that it is never too late to find love, never too late to start over, never too late to create something beautiful. Everything I am, everything Tommy is, everything our children are, it all comes from the choice they made to take a chance on each other." Teresa was crying openly, and Vincent was not far behind. They stood together, supported by each other as always, looking at the sea of faces before them, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends. All of this had come from one simple moment when a tired woman told a weathered cowboy that she was worn out, and he responded that they matched perfectly. As the party continued into the evening, Teresa and Vincent snuck away to their favorite spot one more time. They moved slowly, leaning on each other, but they made it. The sun was setting in brilliant colors, the land spread out before them, and everything was perfect. 30 years, Teresa said wonderingly. "We have been married for 30 years. Best 30 years of my life," Vincent said. "Best decision I ever made, asking you to marry me. Best decision I ever made, saying yes. They stood together in silence for a while, watching the sky change colors. Finally, Vincent said, "When I am gone, do not talk about that," Teresa interrupted. "When I am gone," Vincent continued gently, "I want you to remember something. You were never worn out. You were just waiting for the right person, the right time, the right moment. And when that moment came, you grabbed it with both hands and you built something incredible. You did that, Teresa. You took a chance on a weathered old cowboy and created a family and a legacy that will last forever." Teresa wiped her eyes. "We did it together. I could not have done any of it without you." "We were a team," Vincent agreed. "The perfect team, two halves of a whole." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, they turned and slowly made their way back to the house. Their family was there, waiting all the noise and chaos and love that they had created together. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the store or the material things they had built, but this family, these people, this love that would continue long after they were gone. Teresa and Vincent lived on for several more years, growing frailer but never losing their essential connection to each other. They were never apart for long, always finding their way back to each other's side. Their children and grandchildren cared for them tenderly, repaying the love and attention they had received with love and attention of their own. On a quiet spring morning, when Teresa was 72 and Vincent was 74, Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep with Teresa holding his hand. She was devastated. Of course, losing the love of your life is never easy, no matter how long you have had together. But she did not regret a single moment. They had 32 years of marriage, years full of love and joy and partnership. They had proven that it was never too late for happiness, never too late to find your perfect match. At Vincent's funeral, Tommy read from the journal Teresa had written years before, sharing their parents' story with everyone gathered. "My father once told my mother that they matched perfectly," Tommy said, his voice breaking. And they did. They were two worn-out people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a life together that was extraordinary in its ordinary beauty. They worked hard, loved deeply, and created a family that will honor their memory for generations to come. Teresa lived for 3 more years after Vincent's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. Vincent had been her perfect match, and there would never be another. She spent her final years sharing stories about their life together, making sure the grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew where they came from and what their grandparents had built. On a warm summer evening, Teresa passed away peacefully with Ellie and Tommy by her side. Her last words were, "Tell your father I am coming. Tell him we match perfectly, now and always." They buried her next to Vincent on the rise overlooking the ranch, the spot where they had watched so many sunsets together. The entire town of Fort Bridger turned out for the funeral, along with family members who came from across the country. They laid her to rest beside her beloved husband, 2 weathered stones marking the graves of 2 people who had found each other late in life and proven that love could bloom at any age. The ranch continued under Tommy's stewardship, and then his sons, and then his grandsons. The store in town changed hands many times but always remained a general store, a legacy of what Teresa and Vincent had built together. And in every generation of the Vale family, parents told their children the story of their great-great-grandparents who met when they were both 40 and worn out, who matched perfectly, and who built a love that lasted beyond death and into legend. Because in the end, that was what Teresa and Vincent had created, not just a family or a business or a ranch, but a story. A story about second chances and late-blooming love. A story about 2 people who refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. A story about matching perfectly with someone, Not because you were both young and perfect, but because you were both weathered and worn and ready to build something beautiful together. And in Fort Bridger, Wyoming, for generations to come, whenever someone said they were too old or too tired or too worn out for love, someone else would tell them the story of Teresa Graham and Vincent Vale. The story of a 40-year-old woman and a 42-year-old cowboy who proved that it is never, ever too late to find your perfect match and live happily ever after.